Welcome to night 57 of History Bedtime Stories. In bed, in our pajamas. Tonight we're talking about Jane Johnston Schoolcraft. Now, Jane is born in 1800 on January 31st outside of Sault Ste. Marie in what becomes the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. At the time, we are 37 years ahead of Michigan becoming a state, 37 years ahead of Michigan taking what is now our Upper Peninsula from the territory of Wisconsin. So Jane is born into a family where she really has a foot in two very different worlds. She is Ojibwe. And as a part of the Ojibwe Native American tribe, she has a lot of status. Her grandfather was the warrior chief of the tribe, very, very well respected. Her mother was considered a great beauty, but her mother had fallen in love with a man named John Johnston. And John Johnston had immigrated in 1790 to America from Belfast, Ireland, but he was actually Scottish. So she's got a Scottish dad and a Ojibwe mother, and she's brought up speaking both languages. From her mom, she learns about the culture of their tribe and of their people. She learns the songs and the folklore. And from her father, she gets this great love of English poetry and reading, and is pretty well versed as a child because her dad collects books and has a substantial library, especially for 1800. So she's growing up kind of living this life of being part of two very distinct groups. And it's at this point, at the age of 23, in 1823, she meets the Indian agent assigned to Michigan, a man named Henry Rowe Schoolcraft. And when you see things like Schoolcraft Drive or the town of Schoolcraft, they're not named after Jane. They're actually named after her husband, Henry Rowe Schoolcraft. And as an Indian agent, which was the term at the time, he was the man the government gave the authority to be the intermediary between Native Americans and First Nation people and tribes and the federal government of the United States of America. This position had a lot of power, but it was politically appointed. And Henry really marries Jane partly because the connections. I mean, holy moly, the connections. Everything he wants to study, everything he wants to learn about is involved with the Ojibwe culture. And by marrying her, he kind of gets this access pass. And in fact, the Johnston family is really responsible for a lot of what Schoolcraft gets credit for later in his writings. They're the ones who give him access into the community. Now, it's important to note that Jane Johnston, who becomes Jane Johnston Schoolcraft after her marriage, had an Ojibwe name. Because I'm going to butcher this, and I don't want to in any way disrespect this incredible woman, I'm going to put it up on the screen all spelled out. I think I am pronouncing it close to correct when I say Bamwazina Kai Kwee. If anyone speaks Ojibwe and wants to help us out with that, if you can do a video of the correct way to pronounce her Ojibwe name in the comments, I will reward you with all of the prizes. But Jane, as she's known in the English world, and her husband really are a love match. They adore each other. And Henry really supports Jane's love of reading and writing and encourages her to write more poetry, which she does. A lot of her poems are about day-to-day life. Things like how lovely it is to have these children around them, and the things she cooks and the things she sees. And they're very almost Americana and homesteady in their sweetness and delivery. Henry also writes, but what really drives them to fame is when Jane starts not only translating Ojibwe folklore stories and songs into written English, but when the two start publishing together a magazine called The Literary Voyage. This magazine that they self-publish is, for a lot of Michiganders, their first real foray into understanding the Native American tribes that had what would become Michigan for thousands of years before colonialism. And they start winning a lot of acclaim. It is published in Detroit, Battle Creek, up in Flint. It's widely distributed. During this time, they do have 4 children. 2 live to adulthood, and their son goes on to be a big part of the American Civil War, getting injured at Gettysburg. Jane and her husband eventually lose political favor. They didn't do anything wrong, but presidents change, senators change, and Henry's Indian agent credentials were recalled. At that point, the family moves to New York, and they put the children in boarding school, very up coast, well-to-do thing about them. And a lot of letters between Jane and her 2 children talk about the culture of the Ojibwe, but also just it's a mom missing her kids. As she starts getting into her early 40s, she is riddled with sickness. She just has a lot of immune diseases and problems. And as she gets sicker and sicker, she decides to go visit her sister in Canada. During that trip to visit her sister, she passes away at the age of 42 in 1842 and is buried in Canada. Henry goes on to live a little bit longer before eventually passing away. The sort of beauty of this story and how important Jane is she goes on to be the inspiration for Henry Wadsworth Longfellow's The Song of Hiawatha. The novel was published in 1855 and is considered to be a bestseller even by today's standards. She is also now earning acclaim in her own right, and rightfully so, through her poetry, a lot of which has been republished and used in doctoral theses in the last couple of decades. Since the 1990s, her fame has grown as an author in her own right, and several folk musicians have used parts of her poems as lyrics in their songs. I hope you have been enjoying History Bedtime Stories. Wash your hands, and if you're so inclined, give us a like, share, tag, or comment down in the section below, and we'll enter you into a big old raffle to win some stickers. We'll see you tomorrow night.